It was time to make a big ask of the Air Force, but I was sure they were going to see things my way. And another person was about to enter the story who eventually would completely change my entire perspective on life. This is chapter 6. Between working 3 jobs and taking flight lessons, my progress on my college classes was a little slow. Although I was halfway to a bachelor's degree, I still needed one like yesterday. So I had the idea to take advantage of an opportunity that the Air Force offers for those who are going to be going to an ROTC program. They will let you out of your enlistment early so that you can go to college and then you have a commitment to come back to be in the Air Force and hopefully serve in usually a higher capacity. So I gathered up all my transcripts, which were piecemealed from several different colleges and universities, and which I was very proud of. I got my performance reports along with letters of recommendation, one of which came from Lieutenant General Peterson, the general that I spoke to that recommended I take flight lessons. So I had a solid portfolio that I sent to the board of officers at the Personnel Center. These were the folks who would decide my fate, essentially decide if they were going to let me out early. And I figured, of course they are. They're going to see how hard I worked, and they're going to see this guy wants it. This guy has been doing what he needs to do. Of course, we want him to come back in the Air Force and serve in a greater role. So I sent it off, and weeks of worry went by. Then the answer came, and it was a stinging no. It was 2003, and we were in a full-on war in the Middle East. And apparently, my career field, security forces, was deemed wartime essential. Oh, the irony. If only I felt like I was wartime essential, I wouldn't be pushing so hard to leave. It was a big letdown, but I only had less than a year and a half left on my Air Force contract anyway. So I just decided to stay focused and keep working on what I needed to do to better my life, which included a challenge that I had sort of put on hold until my self-esteem was ready to take this on. This was a big challenge, and it was on the other side of the ocean. She was back in Texas, and not only was she beautiful with thick brown hair and greenish blue eyes, but she was nothing like me. Right after high school, she went to a private university and double majored in 4 years. Then she got a great job afterward where she was finding her footing on the corporate ladder, and in the evenings she was going to graduate school. It was not in her best interest to take my calls. I can only think she was just a big sucker for nostalgia because we originally met in the 8th grade when we had the same English class. While she sat up straight in class and always turned her homework in on time, this was the year that I eventually was expelled from the 8th grade. And even though our lockers were right next to each other, hers was directly above mine, we hardly ever spoke. I don't think I ever said much more than hi to her. We were in totally different crowds, and a nice girl like her would not have been good for my reputation. We moved on to the same massive high school, well, once I was released from alternative school. But again, totally different types of classes and different crowds, and we rarely ever saw each other. And when we did, there was no communication between us at all. Fate started working on us when, after high school graduation, I got a job at a new Sonic drive-in that was opening up. She was already working at another one, but transferred over to this one because it was also closer to her house. So we began dating in the very traditional sense. But even though I was very drawn to her, we were just so different. She was working there to pay for her college, and I was trying to buy louder exhaust pipes for my motorcycles. And I just wasn't mature enough for this opportunity. I think I was probably a little subconsciously intimidated by her drive. So when I left for Korea, I didn't see how we could keep up this long distance relationship. So I called it off. But deep down, I really knew that this was not the end of it. I'll tell you later on the story of how I knew that she was the one. It still gives me chills sometimes just thinking about it. So fast forward a few years, and I'm starting to feel better about myself because I'm making progress toward the goals that I want. So the country music blasting from my truck with my windows down wasn't as loud anymore. I wasn't seeking that kind of attention. I was starting to feel more secure in who I was. And I had a really nice dirt bike at the time, but I was never really good at riding dirt bikes. All I did is just crash and hurt myself and break stuff on the bike. So I figured it was time to do the responsible thing. I sold my dirt bike and I bought an engagement ring. After an 8-month engagement, I returned to San Antonio on my 24th birthday and married 23-year-old Tina. And just like that, she gave up her old life, job, and everything to join me in Hawaii, a decision that I always feared she would regret. Tina always loved little kids, so back in Hawaii, she became a substitute teacher for the local elementary schools, and she continued working on her graduate degree in the evenings. And I was over here, still 2 years away from a bachelor's degree, and just keeping my fingers crossed that something was going to work out and that I was going to be able to be worthy of her, because she was just the most selfless and loving person that I had ever known. And I started to try to keep her at arm's length because of my insecurity. I would complain about insignificant little things that she would do, like how she would cuddle with me and disturb my sleep, and how her long hot showers would make it too humid in the house, and things like that. I began to find fault and be critical with her because of my own insecurity. I would try to draw her into arguments, and I rarely succeeded at that. And when I would even complain that she wasn't arguing correctly. I would say, "Why do you take so long to respond?" And she would say, because she really wanted to think about what she was going to say, because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. And things like that honestly made it even harder for me to feel like I deserved her. Through church, we had friends that were military officers and other types of professionals, and I was uncomfortable with that. And I kept waiting for her to compare us to them. When are we going to have something like that? But she never did. Never did she ever justify my insecurities. When the promotion results came out, it was nice to see that I was selected for E5, Staff Sergeant. But I was never going to wear the rank because my date of separation was right around the corner. And even though my coworkers thought I was crazy, I made the decision to get out of the Air Force so that I could keep pushing for my original dream, finish school faster, and then come back in. And while that had always been the plan since the ROTC opportunity didn't work out, it was actually complicated now since we learned that Tina was pregnant. So here I was with a pregnant wife to support, and I was leaving this military gravy train to get out, and I didn't even have a job. All I had was a plan. I had my fingers crossed. And while I felt a nice sense of freedom leaving the military, I didn't realize how easy life had been, how well things were taken care of. Now back in San Antonio, we found a nice little rental house in what was clearly a rental home community with very large shade trees that were cracking up the sidewalk in the streets and big oil spots in the driveway. But it was all we could afford, and it worked for us. My first thought in looking for a job was going back to the experience I had growing up in San Antonio with my friend Brandon, how we used to love to go to the motorcycle showrooms and check out all the brand new sport bikes and dirt bikes, and just the smell of the new rubber tires, the knobby tires on the dirt bikes and the performance tires on those awesome street machines, and how I just loved being in that environment around those motorcycles. So I thought I could become a salesman. And as luck would have it, there was a position being advertised. So I went and spoke to the sales manager, and he basically offered me the job, but he wanted me to think it over because it was a purely commission job, and he knew that I had a wife and a baby on the way. So he just wanted me to think about it. And so I did. And I figured that it would be flexible with my class schedule because I was signed up to take a full load of classes in the evenings. But my new wife had something more practical in mind. She was looking through the classifieds in the newspaper one day, and she had circled something to bring to my attention. She wanted me to take a look. She hands me the paper and points to an ad for school bus drivers. And I said, "You want me to be a school bus driver? Are you serious?" My jaw was dropped and my eyebrows furrowed, but she didn't budge. She was serious. Then she went on to make a good case for having medical insurance and a steady income. I was not excited to tell my old high school buddy, Brandon, after I had told him that I had an opportunity to work at one of those awesome dealerships that we loved going to when we were in high school. Brandon had been my closest friend during high school, even though he was a couple of grades behind me. But we lived in the same neighborhood, and we worked at SeaWorld together, along with a couple of fast food restaurants we worked at together. And we just hung out a lot. Even though he was a little bit more ambitious than I was, he went right to college and was fast tracking toward a good life. But I had to tell him about flying when I was taking flying lessons and how amazing it was. And so he decided to give it a shot. And by the time I moved back to Texas from Hawaii, he was finishing up his private pilot license. And it wasn't long until he came to the conclusion that flying jets in the Air Force would be an amazing job. So we began renting airplanes together to build our hours and experience, and we flew all around South Texas. And we did our best to keep each other motivated on this challenging track that we both decided to pursue. So we were both very excited about the military air show that was coming to town. This was our chance to get up close to these amazing aircraft and to talk to these pilots and see how they liked their jobs and see how they got their job. And after months of driving a school bus with all those screaming kids back there, I really needed this as a boost to keep me motivated in the direction that I wanted to go. Getting into pilot training has become an obsession now. Now that I'm so unhappy with the way things are looking in my life, with getting up early to drive a school bus and then go to night school at night, staying up late studying, and then just getting up early to do it all over again. I need to hear something from these guys that's basically them telling me, like, just keep going, just push forward, and it will be worth it. But that was not to be the case. Brendan and I were careful when approaching these pilots to not come off as flight simulator nerds. We wanted to let them know that we were serious in pursuing this. So we tried to phrase our questions in a way that let them know that we were knowledgeable about the subject. The first guy we asked, he looked just cool as can be standing there in front of his A-10, tall, slender guy with a green flight suit on and, of course, the aviator glasses. And we told him we were about to finish up college and we wanted to know how he did it. And he goes, well, if you're about to finish up college, then I suggest you just try to go to law school. I was like, what? Really? He did not have good things to say about it. He clearly wasn't happy, and in my eyes, seemed completely ungrateful for the position that he was in. We walked over to a black stealth fighter jet, something that looked like it was out of a science fiction movie, and same thing. Cool looking guy standing there, started asking him questions. Turns out he was upset that he was flying a stealth fighter because he applied to the B-2 program, and he really wanted to be flying the stealth bomber. Oh, boo-hoo. The same thing with the cargo pilot. Not happy about the deployments. Nobody really had anything good to say about this job. And I just couldn't believe that here I was, this is what I wanted more than anything, and these guys had it and weren't even happy with it. And I thought, how could somebody ever be so ungrateful? And I didn't realize it then, but I was setting myself up to have to eat those thoughts down the road. That's chapter 6. Thank you for watching, and please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this series so far. I'd really love to hear from you.